Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. The top 5 holdings for millennials are Nasdaq 100 stocks, according to the Apex Millennial 100 Stock Pulse report. But Apple has been dethroned as the top pick. Joining me to discuss is Bill Capuzzi, CEO of Apex Clearing. Bill, it's great to see you. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Great to see you as well.
And Bill, tell us about the Apex Millennial 100 Stock Pulse report, including demographics and the top 5 holdings, which of course are Nasdaq 100 stocks.
Yeah. So Apex Clearing is a custodian. We hold and protect and service the assets of roughly 10 plus million customers across the United States. The Millennial 100 specifically is focused, the sample size is 1.5 million millennials. Average age is 31 years old. It skews male versus female. And what we do is we track by quarter what stocks are millennials investing in across our client base. And like you said, the top 5 are NASDAQ stocks. I think the really interesting thing from this quarter, with all of the upheaval in the markets and everything that's been happening over the course of this year with COVID, this was the first time the number 1 Apple has been dethroned, and it's moved down to the 3 spot. Tesla has moved up into the 1 spot, which I think was really surprising. We've been doing this for almost 2 years, and Apple has held that spot since the beginning.
So speaking of Tesla, are millennials interested in other areas of EV?
Yeah, I mean, look, the macro play here is just around electronic vehicles. So obviously the Tesla move was a big one. NIO moved up 34 spots on the top 100 list, from 47 all the way up to 13 this quarter. And then 2 really interesting, 2 other interesting plays around electronic vehicles. One has to do with SHILL, SHLL, and the other is SPAC, both of which are SPACs, which have kind of thrust into the scene this year, but both are supporting electronic vehicles. On the other side of this, which I thought was interesting, is that oil stocks in this quarter have been depressed. So Occidental, BP, Royal Dutch have all fallen way back on the top 100 list.
A big story over the third quarter as well was Apple and Tesla splitting their stock. We typically don't see those companies offer stock splits. Did that impact portfolios?
It did. It did. So 2 things are happening as it relates to these companies where the stocks are really high. It's tough for millennials, right? The average portfolio at Apex of those millennials is in the thousands, a couple $1,000s per account. And so when you have some of these securities that are priced beyond the total value of the portfolio for a millennial, it's obviously really difficult for them to invest in that. Apex has been supporting fractional share trading since for about 2 years, so it hasn't been as big a problem if you used Apex as a client. With that said, Apple, Tesla both looked at the broader universe and saw that their stocks were just too expensive for John Q. Public, which was a main driver into why they did the split.
Is COVID-19 continuing to influence millennial holdings?
Yeah, so I think not too surprising. I'll give you some of the names. Peloton is way up, right? So people haven't been able to get to gyms. People are buying the bikes. They're downloading the apps and using Peloton. That went from 86 to 53 on the list. DocuSign thrust onto our list. It was unranked. It's now at 48 on the top 100. People are home, right? They have to sign documents. DocuSign is a way for people to do that electronically. DraftKings is another one that kind of moved way up the list in this third quarter as sports came back onto the scene. And then the last one, which I thought was interesting and I use personally with our kids, is Teladoc, right? So people are afraid to go to the doctors and, for obvious reasons, contracting COVID. Teladoc now, where you're online speaking to a doctor, that went again from unranked to 64 on the list. So for sure, there's big moves. Many of them, if you take a step back and think about what's happening in your personal lives, these all make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's been one interesting thing with 2020 is how influential the retail investor has been in the marketplace. And that's not something that we've seen in quite some time. So do you expect that to continue as we get through Q4 and into 2021?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, the election, there's going to be lots of fireworks going into November. Depends on where things fall in terms of the winner of the election. But again, there's been such a thrust. We're at opening roughly 600,000 new accounts per month, and they are squarely retail investors. So that momentum, which usually dies down in the summer in a normal year, has continued up in 2020. And the expectation is, while it may pull back a bit, I think the volatility will come back down going into the end of this year. I think that the the interest in the markets across the board on the retail side, I think, will continue.
All right, Bill, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Great to see you, Jill. Thanks for having me.
You got it. And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.